In this example, I have a true crime podcast by an author named Dan Zapansky. He's the host of the show. He interviews different authors. And in this particular episode, he's actually interviewing a French serial killer. So it's very spooky. When you think of true crime, what do you think of? You think of like shows similar to like Unsolved Mysteries or, any kind of crime thriller mystery show or movie. Usually when you're thinking of that, it's something dark, something eerie, something dreary, something that makes you feel spooked. So for this kind of podcast, it kind of has you think of what a sound designer would do essentially. So since this person's interviewing a creepy serial killer guy, you might want to implement different things that evoke those emotions even more. You don't want to overpower the recording because that's not the goal as a sound engineer or recording, editing in Adobe Audition. What we want to do is contribute to the recording. If the client or for your own personal project, if that's what they want. So I'm going to go to File, Open. And I'm just going to choose some little spooky noises that I came across here. I'm going to open those files. And all of my files that I've been opening, if you were able to see this, on my left here, they're all showing up in this window here. And you can edit them independently by double-clicking them. They'll open in this waveform view. But let's go back to our multi-track real fast. So because we're working on a true crime podcast, I'm going to bring in some like scary sounds. So I'll drag and drop different sounds into this just so we can kind of stack up our elements and create a feel. So now I have my sounds ready to go, and I will dive into some of these other buttons here. So every track has this option of a mute, solo, and record. The last little button, we're not going to worry about this for now because we're not recording into this particular project. But if I want to solo something, I just press the S. That allows me just to hear this one thing. Even though there's a stack of sounds, S will solo just that sound.
A thing that existed.
So I can mute different things if I want to listen to other sounds within this recording. So those allow me to pinpoint what I'm listening to and monitoring at a time. Importantly, there's a volume knob here where I can turn this down, and that will affect all the audio within this channel, within this track, I should say. Everything, if I stacked multiple sounds in this track. So if I have different elements, they're all stacked up in one particular track. If I turn this volume down, it's going to affect everything within this track. However, you have an option to adjust just the volume on an independent separate piece. And that's where these lines come into play here. This yellow line and this white line. The yellow line represents volume. So I can make something quieter by clicking a few times and adding points and moving them around. So I can make gradual fade in and fade out, or just volume levels, particular areas. So if you're, listening to a car commercial or something, the volumes of the sound of the music and the dialogue aren't at the same level. That one's not overpowering the other. You can also adjust the panning. So let me undo this, exaggerate this and press play. You'll hear the panning.
Voodoo and possession. I had all those books at home. It was very
So it goes from the right to the left ear. So you can hear the panning. And again, these lines here only affect this audio section versus these knobs here will affect everything on the track. So just keep that in mind. So if I'm creating, a whole feel for this particular true crime podcast, things I would think of when I think of spooky are like footsteps, maybe some dreary music or atmospheric kind of sounds. So that's what I imported into here. So I'm going to mute this and go one at a time and kind of adjust the volume. So I'll make a selection. I'll put this on loop play.
I stayed in Cameroon for a year, so
I'll make this selection a little shorter.
What I can recall from
I'll turn down the volume a little bit. So I like that level there. I could even be a little lower.
What they told me is that.
And then I will add this additional noise. So I can unmute that now.
We stayed in Cameroon for a year, so I don't have any recollection of the country.
And I can build up the feel of this particular podcast. You may not have a true crime podcast. Maybe you have a sports podcast. Maybe you have a comedy podcast. These are just things you can think about while you're editing.